I'm going to stand because I need to tower over this group. It's a very interesting group, and I'll tell you why. We have the world's largest commercial transaction and investment firm represented by Ram. We have two of India's largest real estate companies, multi-use, represented by Arvind and Aditya. And we have Asia's greenest building provider, represented by Suhail. So you got the world's biggest, you got India's biggest, and you've got Asia's greenest. Now, the topic is interesting because the earlier panel was on prop tech unicorns. But the funny part is four unicorns in a decade. It's way, way too small. But the earlier panel gave you insights on how startups can get to where those guys were. Now today, I'm going to ask this esteemed group here on what are the challenges faced by them in adopting prop tech. Because if the startups here get a handle on that, they'll be able to tailor-make their solutions to address their needs. Now, the interesting thing to put in perspective is Mahindra Group has completed close to 20 million square feet of development and has another 10.75 million under development. The Embassy Group has completed almost 68 million square feet of construction and will have several millions more. CBRE manages $144 billion worth of investments. And of course, you're small, boutique, but profitable. So let's get to asking the right questions. The first question now to you, because you've been actively involved with Brigade REAP from almost day one, and CBRE is an active participant in the PropTech journey. What are some of the 3 tech interventions CBRE is seeing that's working for them?
Actually, hi, good afternoon, everyone. I think it's not just 3 interventions. If you look at it globally, and we're solving for many things globally, for our occupier clients, for our developer clients, for our investor clients, and solving for how we deliver service to all these customers of ours. If you look at it, there are probably 6. I would bucket it as 6 probably, which are really being able to solve for all of these. If you look at AI, because there's billions and billions of data sources available, how are you assimilating that data to be able to meaningfully derive value for an occupant of a building, for the developer who owns a portfolio of assets, whether it's commercial, retail, industrial, residential, how you manage buildings. We manage 7 billion square feet globally. So that's one on the AI and managing that data. The second is the visual experience. When you're providing experience to your customer, how you making sure that that experience, that journey on how you're taking through, whether it's buying a property, whether it's selling a property, whether it's taking him for a virtual tour, how you presenting that data, and does he physically need to go and see the property itself? Today, that's the big thing, right? Third thing is when you manage property from day-to-day running and operations of buildings. That's another big area that we're seeing a lot of growth in, because you have air quality, you have schedules that you manage buildings. I'm sorry, I'm breaking it down into basics so that it's easier for everyone to understand. On what schedules you're providing, preventive maintenance. Today we're talking about sustainability. When you use A product versus B product in a building, how sustainable it is, what is the end result of that? So all of these aspects really define on how technology will play a big role. And how you compile that data, are able to grasp that data, to put it together to make sure it gives you meaningful results.
So AI, visualization, IoT and sensors to give you predictability, great. Aditya, you guys have a fascinating spread. You got WeWork, you got hotels, you got schools, you got commercial, you got retail, you got residential. Do you see the same set of use cases, or do you see something more?
I think there's so many use cases. I think the one thing that you touched upon, Ram, which we find interesting, is just analyzing data. It's a simple one, it's not complicated, but using tech to enable how you collect data, how you look at cost to complete versus receivables, and then how you make decisions financially on where you should deploy money as a company, what's selling, what's not, why it's not, understanding the customer's reactions to product is such a simple one that is just a simple dashboard that we've created, and we can see these real-time informations that's linked in with SAP and Salesforce. So that's a pretty interesting one, but the gamut is massive. It's not just what Ram mentioned. I mean, if you just get into construction tech, there's so much to do in that space. I think as India, we haven't been able to do much. And when you think of those companies, or when you think at least as a developer, how can I use some of these companies? You have to think, is it A, increasing revenue, or B, reducing costs, or making it more efficient? Is it going to start my revenue faster? Or let's say, is it going to reduce manpower, which will remove cost? I think that is the key tick box that these companies have to tick for you to use them. It's not just that you want to use technology to be cool. So I think, across the gamut of construction tech, one or two derivatives off of just tech-enabled companies that make you more efficient. There's so much to do in this space, but I just, the only message I would say is, from a developer point of view, it has to make cost sense. And if it doesn't, you would hesitate to use those companies.
So great. So you talked of data, and I'll give you a little story on data. And you talked of two things that startups should do, and that's what we insist on: cost optimization and revenue maximization. Am I right?
Either or, yeah.
Either or, okay. Now, 5 years back, we had two, and Ram, you'll remember this, we had two big data companies come into real estate. And jury one was completely flummoxed, saying, what can data do in real estate? And the second challenge they had is, where are they going to get their data from? And both these companies, one got acquired by Tanuj, which was Props AMC, and the other one just got funded by Sotheby's, which is CRE Metrics. And today we are seeing quite a lot of data companies come into the space, just delivering enhanced efficiencies. Sohail, to you, you've been a guinea pig of sorts for Brigade Reap startups. And I still remember when I met Sohail 6.5 years back, he said, listen, get me any startup and I'll tell you if it works or not. And you've used some of your startups to deliver the greenest building in Asia. What did you look for in these startups?
So first, as Ram as well as Aditya mentioned, financial sustainability is the key. It either has to reduce your cost, or you reduce your OPEX, or increase your revenue. This is the primary thing. The second thing I as a company look, since I'm a niche player, is can you help me weave a very compelling marketing story for my customer? If it does that, it definitely delivers profits. As I've seen recently, we've been able to sort of increase our top line by as much as 30-40% post the pandemic in the project that we got some awards. That's a key factor. The third thing I look for is, am I an early adapter? This gives me a big competitive edge to be offering a very unique selling proposition to the customers. And I think the future, in further discussions, I'll share some more insights on these startups.
But Sohail, I would just want to pause with you. Many of the startups you used had no traction. They had very little viability, yet you took the risk. What did you see in those startups?
It's just that I saw the value in the product.
Okay.
And it was solving an issue that I had. And I believed, simply because I was the backing of Brigade Reap, I believed in the product and went ahead with it. Example is EcoSTP, which, as I believe, I'm the first customer. And now there are probably 100 odd installations across the country.
Thanks. Arvind, we met about 3 years back, and you've been an active propagator of what we do, and you lead your entire team to actually get involved with Brigade Reap. What do you look for in startups to address what problems of yours?
Yeah, so we look at, let me split it into 4 broad areas in which we think technology can play a strong role in construction. 3 along the value chain, and 1 is kind of a horizontal. The 3 along the value chain are, let me call it, this is my own coinage, so consumer tech, construction tech, and home tech, right? So stuff that is about customer experience, either sales, service, any of those aspects I put into the first bucket. Anything around improving construction speed, efficiency, quality, cost, sustainability is all in the second bucket. Smart homes, smart buildings, those kinds of things are in the third bucket. And then the horizontal is management decision, which pointed to. How do you use technology to be more agile in management decision making? So I think that those are the kinds of startups we've encountered at Brigade Reap and other startup ecosystems that we've been engaged with. For me, it's been a hugely positive learning journey. And while we've talked about, there has to be a payback and a cost, return to cost kind of equation. For me, the cost is very negligible working with these startups. The learning is far higher than any cost we pay.
Great. Now let's get into specifics. Give us examples of 2 startups who've actually caught your attention, delivered value, and who you are using more and more. And I'd like each one of you to give me 2 examples.
So I would say one on the sales tech side, we had started putting these building blocks in place from 2018 onwards. But when COVID hit us, we brought all these together and said, threw ourselves a challenge. Can we do a zero-touch sales experience? This was the first four to 6 months of COVID. Nobody was allowed out of their house. So obviously there were no site visits or face-to-face sales possible. So we said, look, what's the worst that can happen? Anyway, we're doing zero sales. So let's go out and throw ourselves this challenge that let us architect what we already have into a system that allows us to sell homes remotely over video calls. And not just sell homes, we took it all the way forward into actually registering the agreement also electronically. So all payments electronic, the registration happening electronically, stitched up that entire thing. And it was hugely eye-opening. I'm not suggesting that should be the way we sell going forward. I believe we will continue to have, the phygital sales models. But the fact that we were able to do that taught us a lot about consumer behavior. It taught us a lot about how to be very specific on product features and selling, etc. When you use the traditional sales model, you tend to, fudge around a lot of things and not be sharp enough. So that is one area which I think has stood us in good stead, and we are continuing to build on that. The second is on the construction tech side. We got a startup from Brigade Reap. We came across them in the first cohort that I interacted with. I'm very excited by what they bring to the table in terms of water measurement as well as analytics. We've deployed them in one project and hoping to take them forward in many other projects.
Great. Suhail, you talked of EcoSTP. Can you give us one other company that you've used which has either delivered cost efficiency or revenue maximization or customer delight?
So I'll just delve into a little bit about the ecoSTP story, how we stumbled upon them. So when we started digging for our STP with the conventional technology, we had to go about 5 meter deep. And we encountered hard rock at about 3 meters. And the cost of sort of breaking up for the next 2 meters was prohibitively expensive. And then we started going through probably tens of STP companies and somehow stumbled upon ecoSTP who said that I need only a 3 meter depth. And just by that, I saved my entire sort of extra cost of ecoSTP, selecting them as a vendor. And then over the years, I maintained it for 3 years. Every year, my saving on the maintenance was about 3% of a conventional STP. So I have recovered at the source, and then while maintaining, I have probably become profitable on the STP itself. That is the ecoSTP side. Now, initially when I spoke to them, the product was very expensive. It was not financially sustainable. So I decided to shelve it, and then I think that was before they were part of Brigade Reap. And then they went through Brigade Reap and they came back and saying that we are on a rental model. And that's when it made financial sense for me, and now we have used it in our project and customers are also happy.
Aditya, some examples?
I'll give you 1 or 2 companies that I find really interesting. One is a company called Staku. They do video surveillance AI. And I only say this because they actually ticked one of those boxes, which I said is reducing manpower, which reduce cost. And it's really cool. It's, that integrates into your CCTV, but it can get programmed to tell you, or you can program it to say, hey, I want to check if the cleaner has made 100 strokes. You can see if someone's smoking and a non-smoking. You can see if there's a breach of compound wall. So you can program it to do some interesting things. Universities do it for PDA, for, you know, if couples are kissing. So it's quite interesting, and we've actually seen a reduction of manpower. That's one company we've been impressed with. The other one I would name is a company we're doing a pilot with called Flamenco, BMS, and, you know, just digitalizing a building. I think, you know, that's really the entry step when a construction company looks at using technologies. You know, the building is, how do you digitalize that? How do you calculate? How do you monitor it? How do you save on it? How do you assess your building's usage and then make things more efficient? So I wouldn't say we found use yet since it's a pilot, but that's a company that's been pretty interesting that we have our eyes on.
Great. Ram?
We actually partnered with a firm called Flawed. They were a startup once upon a time. This was 3D visualization of floor spaces. 3D visualization of floor spaces, a company called Flawed, and then we acquired them. In India, we've used CRE Matrix, which is again a Brigade Reef company. Extensively, we have an annual subscription to them. We use their data to be able to evaluate on leases, expiration of leases, and also to track how we can engage with those clients whose leases are expiring. So more from a business development initiative for us.
Great.
We are also building a lot of internal stuff for our own businesses. So in a way, that's a startup to us of sorts.
Great. Two more questions. The first question is, you know, and we've seen this at REAP, and you know, Nirupa also spoke about it. Many of the startups that the jury at Brigade and people like all of you select for us are startups that many people in Brigade themselves don't want to use, and we realize that other real estate developers are using them. And every time something like this happens, we go to Nirupa and say, listen, you have to crack the whip. And then she does it, and startups get business. Did you guys face the same challenges internally to convince people, listen, use a startup? Or would it always be, listen, they are not a Cisco, they're not a Microsoft, they're not an Intel, they're not big. Aditya, have you faced internal pressures on using startups?
We were just talking about it and laughing in the other room. Is, I think in India, I don't know if it's an Indian thing, but find that a lot of the facilities guys and the op guys are quite hesitant on using certain things. And ultimately, they are the technical guys who, at least even I rely on making a decision, right? There's some stuff that even I don't understand that I would say, hey, go meet the ops guy and get his blessing. And you see a little pushback from them. You know, maybe it's insecurity of their job potentially in a strange way. So that's kind of an awkward challenge to have when you're trying to implement efficiencies, but you're having pushback internally. And Ram was saying, you know, the guys from abroad get fed up because it's an Indian mindset. But yeah, that's...
So how do you handle that? Yep.
I think the bigger challenge is not a challenge using startups. I think the startups in India are fantastic. The innovation, they understand the challenges in India. We're solving for very different things that are not necessarily the challenges in the Western world. But if you look at it, the problem is integration. The problem is the technology that a global corporate has already adopted to. Those protocols, how do you plug in? How will you get the blessings to plug in? That's a big, big challenge.
But that's a problem that the three of them don't have. They're running their own companies. So Arvind, how do you...
Internally, as an entrepreneur, it's much easier. For a global corporation, you go and try and sell it to a multinational occupier. Very difficult. That's the biggest barrier. It's not about cost. Relevance of technology is important. Are they solving for today, or is it future-proof, and will the startup remain to continue to deliver for them? That's another problem, right? You're making a product, but will you be able to deliver and continue to deliver is one big challenge. But the biggest challenge is plugging it in.
You know, so this is a lesson for all startups here. And now I'm glad you brought this. Try not to go to multinationals because they're governed by global protocols and global norms. And to integrate into, we remember Spinkly, to integrate into a lift, I mean, we got stuck at the OEM level. So it's better to deal with homegrown, successful companies, because once you get in, you're permanently in. Would I be right in saying that?
Well, I'd say yes and no. You know, Mahindra Group, as you would expect, has pretty challenging and stiff IT protocols. So there's an internal joke within Mahindra Lifespaces about any startup that works with us. Okay, let them encounter the VAPT, and then we'll see whether they survive that test. So it's less about proving your technology, your use case. Is more about cracking the VAPT that the group imposes. But that being said, look, we have navigated those challenges. The biggest challenge, I think there are two kinds of challenges we faced working with startups. The first is at the buy-in level and establishing that there is actually a saving or a revenue enhancement or whatever is the business case around it in the first set of implementations. And that takes a little bit of pushing. Often it needs to be you need to twist a few arms to get that done. Once that is done, the other challenge that is faced is, okay, now I want to deploy this quickly across 40 ongoing projects. And then the startup kind of stutters about, I can't do this because I don't have the resources to be able to do it.
Suhail, you don't have this issue. But how do you get, Suhail is a guy who says, listen, I want to get it done. Am I right? And your team gets it done.
No, but internally challenges are lesser. But the bigger challenge I face is externally in the ecosystem, like the consultants and things like that. So when you bring in a new idea, they are very averse to accepting those ideas. And we need their sign-off to take it to the regulators for approvals and stuff. So there are times when I've had to put my foot down that either you work with me on this or I look for somebody else. And that's the only time it happens.
So I'll give you one interesting insight from Suhail. Tell us about some mistakes you made with startups and technology.
So I've had two kinds of mistakes. One is a successful product, but it was a mistake because the customers couldn't accept. I went for windmills on top of my buildings, and the product worked very well. I was able to light up my common area lighting, a part of it with the windmills. But then there was a few, say a small percentage of customers who could not sort of bear the vibration that was coming through the building. While it was negligible, because of them, we could not use it on the long term. That was one type of a failure that we had.
So startups, interesting problem. Great product, solving a real problem, saving money. In fact, almost 50% of your common area lights came from the windmills.
A little less than that. I had a lot of other things going on.
Sure. But he put the windmills on his elevator shaft, and the windmill company didn't tell him this, but there was vibration going down the elevator shaft. So homes on both sides.
A few of them, and we mitigated it, but it was not enough for the customers.
So despite being very, very clued on to what customers want, you still err because you never know how customers react. So we have less time, so I'm going to ask one set of questions each. What is the advice that you would give for startups to get business from Mahindra?
So I'm going to give a very counterintuitive advice. Price your service to full value. I keep coming across startups who are willing to do work for free. If you're doing work for free, you won't get the attention.
Nice.
Price for full value, you will get the attention you need and you will prove what you are capable of.
Suhail?
I would say that the India's climate targets are very stiff, and our industry is one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions and carbon emissions. So our targets are the commitment to the climate changes. By 2070, we intend to go net zero. And we had a CREDAI NatCon recently where the builders took a pledge to go net zero by 2050. We've had a lot of startups working on water, but energy is the space where we are going to meet those targets, and we don't have enough of startups working in that space. So the cost aspect of energy management is very high. So we need startups to work on that and bring that down to affordable levels, because sustainability cannot be a buzzword. It has to be the basic feature of a project, and at this point it's expensive to incorporate. So we are not seeing any upside in the pricing. The customers are not ready to pay anything more. So we have to reduce our cost to incorporate sustainability.
So I would say the opposite of Arvind, and not just because I'm a Sindhi, but because, get us hooked onto the drug and then take up pricing. Because if you want to convince someone like us to use your product, it's a risk for us. And if the pricing is too much of a risk, then it's tough for us to use you. So do a good pricing, and then once the developer starts seeing value, start taking things up. And the other thing I would add is great customer service. We've done business with some small companies, and we just don't have that attention or the quality of customer service. I think that's a bit frustrating, and then you end on a bitter note, and suddenly they're doing well, but you don't want to use them. So customer service is quite important.
So this is a challenge. So we have many startups who start with low SaaS tickets. They do extremely well. They show millions of dollars in savings. And when they go back to the same developer to increase price by 20%, he said, sorry. So it's a double-edged sword. Three diverse views, but interesting. Ram, advice?
I think the key is uh, if you ask most startups today if they were to acquire customers in India versus the US, it's so much easier to acquire customers in the US. The quantum of money you will get to pay for your service in India, you'll probably get 7x in the US. So the target is, man, I need to acquire my American client and not worry about the Indian client. That's the big problem, right? While we are solving for many things in India and cost is a big pressure, I think the question is the technology relevant? And if you see the relevance of it, you'd want to use them. The pluggability, the integration part is the second most thing. And can he deliver and remain to be committed to deliver? Because a lot of them want to sell out. Today, it's a game that I want to make something, move on to the next thing, right? So the question is, can you continue to be in existence to deliver?
Right, John, I'm going to slip one more in, which is particularly for startups that are in IT kind of solutions, but maybe others as well, just the long tail change management support. As founders, many of you are sold on your solution. You believe the value proposition is self-evident, and it is. But as clients, we very often need that continuous nudge, push, hand-holding to make sure that the solution actually embeds itself in the organization.
And great point, Arvind. So we tell our startups that your first 5 clients, treat them like God, because they will give you the next 50. And to your point, many startups fail at the altar of delivery, and then you get so pissed with them that word gets around that, listen, and they become untouchable. So it's not just your solution, it's also the service that follows through. And we heard Srikanth talk in the earlier panel about the same thing. So it's not just the product, it's also the service that goes with it. Let's throw open to questions. Happy to answer questions. Anybody?
So a quick question to anybody from the 3 real estate guys, not to Ram. Nobody ever lost their job for buying IBM. That was an old famous saying in the computer industry. Is that the reason why your operating staff under you is hesitating to use startups? Is it a culture issue in your organizations?
So I can answer that, and I'm sure others would concur. There's a very deeply entrenched behavioral challenge. I mean, buildings have been built the same way for the last 40, 50 years. We've used the same materials. Cement, which is the wonder material that we use, was invented 100 years back. We've not moved beyond that. So there is a very kind of deeply entrenched way of doing things that shaking it up requires a significant amount of effort.
I think I completely agree. There is a mindset. I mean, I think out of the box because I'm not a civil engineer. It's very tough to change mindset of people who study and work in the same industry. If you have a different thought process, and change will happen.
Yeah, I don't know. I find that some people who are very pro-tech and will be over-ambitious to get technology involved. And then there's some that's stubborn and a bit averse to it. I think as a promoter, you have to take a pragmatic call and sometimes push things through even when you're finding internal pushback.
I think, Samir, a lot of times it all comes from the leadership, right? If the business leader is pro-tech and wants to innovate and sees an opportunity that technology can solve some of their issues, they will go ahead and use tech. They will want to evolve. Obviously, it depends on who you empower in the organization who's evaluating that tech. And that's a big problem. That's a big challenge. And today, I mean, we have a technology center in 2 locations in India, and we have a couple around the world. We have 1,500 people there and growing up to 2,000 plus people in India in that tech center. And they're developing tech for us. And a lot of times the software engineers don't necessarily understand the problem statement. So it's on how you work along with them to solve for what they want you to deliver, what we want them to deliver for us. So I think that experience is very important. So if a promoter has his solution and he knows there's no ready-made solution available off market to buy in, and he sees an opportunity, whether it's on sustainability, whether it's on power, whether it's on just the user experience on VR, etc. There are enough and more, but who can you trust to be able to deliver? And you want to bring in those aspects to make that change, it's possible.
But Samir, it's an interesting point you raised. So we've seen a new trend happening for the past 2 years. You know, organizations like Mahindra, like Max Estates, like Brigade, they bring in their second-rung people and get them exposed in a very organized manner to startups from Brigade Re. So we do this regularly for Mahindra, we do this regularly for Brigade, and that buy-in, and we do it for CBRE. Ram has organized several, because if you don't get that rung, understanding the value that they can deliver to the individual, for them to challenge the status quo becomes difficult. And we see Kudai Kerala regularly calls us and says, Suhail, he keeps screaming, he said, man, you're not sending any good startups to me. So we are seeing that trend happening. It's happened thanks to COVID. COVID has been a great accelerator for us. And many of our startups are presenting almost every, Venki is not here from IMB, but many of our startups are taken to IMB, which has a real estate program which brings in 30, 40 developers, and they're exposed to them. So you're seeing that trend, and I think that's moving faster now. Yeah, there's a question there.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Chaitanya. So I have a question again for the developers in specific, right? A lot of these construction tech companies are trying to solve a problem, right? But every developer has their own way of executing certain things. For example, if I take a problem statement of site management or site data collection, right? Everyone has their own way of doing that problem statement. So it becomes very difficult to actually nail down the nitty-gritties of a solution. When we talk about solution fitting the particular workflow, right? I might be solving a problem statement that probably works well with a particular customer, but 3 other customers it will not suit them because they have a different way of approaching it, or they already have something in place that they built in-house. Like Ram also mentioned that they are also building their solutions in-house. So how can these startups or these companies, find that problem statement fit? And how can we interact more with the developers or the community as such to actually validate that problem statement that actually exists and it's not just our own figment of imagination, and how we can tweak it better to be able to generalize that solution across the industry.
So, you're giving us a lot of credit by saying that we have a unique way of doing things. We actually have 30 different ways of doing the same thing. So by you coming in, maybe you will be the unique way of us ending up standardizing many of these things.
So I do agree with you with that. I think that's the challenge if I was you guys as well, is how do you approach it? And I don't know, probably each company is different. For Embassy, I would say I would personally always rely on the technical guy, our projects guy, our PMC, to really see if it's going to add value. And if there's still a pushback, then you got to find a way to the promoter and explain your case and explain to him in a very simplified manner, how are you really adding value? Because me personally, I'm not an engineer. I completely rely on our site guys for all the experience and knowledge they have. So if they're not convinced for some odd reason, try to find your way on top, but try to explain your value proposition in a very simple manner.
Give you an example with our experience with the Embassy Group. We didn't have inroads into them, but we found a connect with somebody, and they told us, go to Sangram and to Raghu, who's your co-working, and we took 5 of our startups each to board of these people, and they've now talking to the startups to evaluate what is the value prop that they can deliver to Embassy. So if you have a very sound value prop on 2 counts, how can I save money? How can I make more money? More important, how can I save money? It's easier to get the attention of the promoter in a real estate firm. Am I right?
Yeah. Like we've done pilots where the company's taken the cost on themselves, but we've seen data to see how cost has reduced. And sometimes we funded those pilots as well on cost or maybe a smaller margin. But we've done that to test it out, and then I've sat in those meetings where I've actually seen facts. And obviously then I would push it down.
Hi, my question is to Aditya. Hi, my name is Bhargav. Not all the startups would give value in terms of cost saving. There could be startups which could help you in saving time or probably improve your quality. What saving as per you? Probably they would save 5 rupees per SFT or 15 rupees per SFT. What saving as per you would be the value that they can add to you? Because there is always an indirect value that they give, not always direct towards the cost.
Yeah, so saving cost or adding revenue, and revenue can be added by higher quality, so increasing sales price, increasing brand value, or like you mentioned, saving on time, starting your revenue faster. So yeah, it's a tough one to kind of put a metric on how do you kind of quantify that, but pretty much if you tick those either of those two boxes and preferably both, saving costs or adding revenue, that ticks the bucket for us to explore, and then it's a partnership, right? We are helping you, you are helping us, and we're both growing together.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Sangeeta. Hi, Ram. I have a company where we manufacture composite panels that are used for construction. So one of my questions to you is, when you decide, which startup to or which technology that you want to support, do you just look at what y'all are looking at, or do you look at what the consumer or the customer is looking at? Because when I go and talk about my products, a lot of the people who are building homes and stuff say, oh, your walls are made of this. What if a robber comes through? So I said, if a robber comes through the walls, I said, if a robber wants to come into your house, he's going to come in either through the door or the window. So, so these are the kind of questions that I keep getting when it is something new. I find, there is this reluctance to try something new, and especially because as Indians, we want to give our homes to our children, grandchildren, it keeps going on. So what do you take into consideration when you look at startups?
I mean, the short thing I would say is, whatever the customer wants is what we want. So it all stems from the customer for sure, and then that translates to information and then what we go looking for. So it has to start with the actual end use problem.
Yeah, but
I'll just add one thing to that, which is we do have a role to play in influencing what the customer wants.
Exactly,
So it
that's
is
what I was
not,
going to ask.
It's not a passive role because very often new materials, for example, as I said, we've used cement for the last 30 years to build buildings. Any new material we introduce is going to be new. But we need to be convinced that we can convince the customer.
Yes.
That particularly if it's something that they will touch and feel, if it's something that's going to be back of house, then it doesn't matter. But if it is front of house, the usability aspect, is it something they will... in Mumbai, drywall panels got a very bad name for a particular incident that happened. But that doesn't mean that you throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, okay.
Again, very importantly on who your customer is, right? If it's an end user versus a developer who's then selling it to an end user, a lot of times it's all about saying, should I go and try out something new? If it's a new product or a new service, I'd rather go with someone tested. Even when you look at BMS for buildings or any product, it's all about tried and tested. Is there a track record? Should I be the guinea pig? When it's an end user who's doing his home interiors, when they hear about a new product, they want to experience a new look and feel, they're willing to try out stuff. So it really depends on who your customer is.
And I'll give you another insight. Most startups, when we take them to real estate companies and we ask them, what do you want from this first meeting? Everybody wants to close a sale. And we now insist that none of the startups will make a sales pitch at the first meeting to a Ram, to Aditya, to a Suhail, or to an Arvind. You showcase your product, you ask for feedback, because all the other panels allude to one thing: solve a pain point that they want solved and not sell what you have. So the first meeting is more about understanding their response to you and to see whether you actually address a serious pain point for which they're willing to pay. So the first meeting has to be about understanding what Ram said, the customer, his or her pain point, and does your product address that? And sometimes that journey takes a month. And I think Suhail alluded to, when they came to us, they had 25 lakhs a month revenue, profitable. But their sales cycles were 6 months to 8 months. And because people like Suhail said, listen, I'm not going to pay you capex because 2 years later I'm going to hand over the building to an RWA. Which is when we sat with them, worked their BOM cost, and then when it became an OPEX model, the real estate fraternity was very happy. They said, listen, I'm not investing crores of rupees upfront. I'm paying you 50 rupees per outlet per month. Works, and that's how they've scaled. So sometimes it's not about selling, it's about understanding the pain point.
Yeah, I mean, I also wasn't talking about selling, but understanding, trying to convince a customer. You all take part in that. I mean, if you find that the product is good, would you work on, talking to the consumer and customer and telling them, yes, I believe in this, or just, okay, I mean, he does not want this product, so I'm going to back off.
I think it's a journey. We certainly are willing to walk in your shoes or with you along that journey. So what we try and do in many of these new materials and new construction methods is use it in ancillary structures. So we build the clubhouse building with these materials rather than the main building. We get comfort with it. We understand how to deal with those materials, how to handle them. And as the customers use that, they also understand that, look, this is not so bad after all.
Thanks.
Hi. My name is Nishant. So Arvind, sometime back you mentioned about the customer experience and you mentioned about the touchless journey of the customer. So do you see the VR technology or something which will come up in the market and, like you see the data points coming in which says that people are, moving towards online booking or, the first-hand experience will happen online and then the person would come to the site, something like that. Can you share some insights about the data which you might have collected?
Yeah, so as I said, we did this zero-touch launch in 2020, June, July. So we sold 250 apartments where none of our salespeople ever met the customer. The customer didn't visit any site. They were sitting on their sofa or dining table at home and booking the apartment. And this was, mind you, this was the lowest end of our product set. So affordable housing, average ticket size of 15 to 20 lakhs, people investing hard-earned money, their first home that they're buying. So it was a very high involvement purchase. It was not just a frivolous impulse decision kind of purchase. It happened. Now, am I advocating that that is the way selling should happen? No, absolutely not. I mean, there is a physicality to our business, there's a physicality to our sales experience. So we shouldn't abandon that. But having this capability allows you to crisscross the journeys across both the physical and virtual worlds, which I think that's the nature of the consumer journey today in all categories. Why would it be any different in when you go and buy a car? You're doing a lot of your research online. You may still do your test drive. Today, even sometimes test drives are not done because you just go by reviews of experts and then choose your car. But the only physical touch point is your test drive and then you buy the car. So why can't we do the same in real estate?
Great, thank you so much. Thanks, Arvind. Thanks, Suhail. Thanks, Aditya. Thanks, Ram. Insightful. I think it's been a great day. And to see a room still full of people at 4:30 is very reassuring for us that perhaps we're doing the right thing. And thank you all for your support. Thank you all for attending.